So our second session examines harnessing art for social change. There have been a few voices in India's music scenario that have gone beyond the call of art. These voices have mesmerized audiences, but have also been instrumental in provoking people to think, to respond, and to act. We're joined now by Shubha Mudgal. She was born into a musically dedicated family, trained by some of the finest musicians and musicologists in the country, like Pandit Ramashray Jha, Pandit Vinay Chandra Moudgalya, and Pandit Vasant Thakur. She later learned stylistic techniques from well-known maestros, Pandit Jitendra Abhisheki and Pandit Kumar Gandhar, and also received training in Tumri from Srimati Naina Devi, and is today a versatile and popular performer. In addition to being a performer, Shubha has also won recognition as a composer, getting numerous accolades and awards, including the Padma Shri and the Gold Plaque Award for Special Achievement in Music at the 34th Chicago International Film Festival, and the Yash Bharati Samman from the government of Uttar Pradesh in 2015. Shubha is closely involved with several projects related to music education, and together with her husband, Anish Pradhan, she has established an online distribution platform for musicians specializing in diverse forms of Indian music through their website, www._records.com. We are also to be joined by vocalist in the Carnatic tradition, M Krishna, whose musicality eludes standard analysis, as uncommon in his rendition of music and original in his interpretation of it. He is simultaneously strong and subtle, traditional, and stunningly innovative. As a public intellectual, Krishna is vocal, and he writes about issues affecting the human condition or about matters that are cultural. Krishna has started and is involved in many organizations whose work has spread across the whole spectrum of music and culture. He's authored and co-authored several thought-provoking and path-breaking books, disseminated and addressed crucial issues of caste, class, and gender within society, while exploring the contours of democracy, culture, and learning through his writings. We're waiting for him to come online. Much of TMK's career in recent years has been about challenging notions of the classical through a series of collaborations that cut across hierarchies of caste, class, and gender. He's been part of inspiring collaborations, performances, conversations, and of course, partnerships that address music, poetry, art, culture, and a myriad other themes. In 2016, M Krishna received the prestigious Ramon Magsaysay Award in recognition of his powerful and forceful commitment as an artist and advocate to art's power to heal India's deep social divisions. In 2017, he received the Indira Gandhi Award for National Integration for his services in promoting and preserving national integration in the country. He continues to, of course, breach the bastions and dazzle us with his brilliance. To moderate this session, we have the festival co-organizer of Knowledge Factory, Meena Vaidyanathan, a social entrepreneur who founded social businesses like Neeti Consulting, which is also the co-founder and curator of Knowledge Factory, and Questera Foundation. So here are Meena, who's going to be conversing with Shubha Mudgal and T.N. Krishna.
Good afternoon. It's an honor, a privilege, and pure joy for someone like me who has been in the pursuit of music for over 3 decades to be with two of my favorite musicians. So firstly, a very, very warm welcome to Knowledge Factory 2021. And thank you for joining us. You know, music is a moral law, Plato said. You know, it gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety to life and to everything. Most of us hear music from the moment we are born, you know, with lullabies, and through many of the most important occasions in our lives, you know, from graduations to weddings to funerals. There's something about music that seems to bring us closer. to one another and help us come together as a community. It's also a ubiquitous part of our human experience. There are several studies now that have found that we are wired to enjoy music and to bond with each other through music than even when compared to other environmental sounds. So, and now we have two of the most eminent musicians in our midst. So I can't wait to start our conversation about how music plays, what role it plays, and how it can actually bring about social change. Let me start with you, Shubhaji. I'd like to talk to you about, or I want you to tell about an experience that you might have had over your illustrious, very long career when music has had a strong influence on someone's personality uh, or experience.
Well, first, thank you for inviting me for this session. And I know that every artist, every musician does his or her little bit to use art as a tool for messaging about social change. But of course, the evaluation of how effective that message is left to various kinds of compilation of data, etc. But in the past, I've been fortunate to have been part of several projects that were designed really to use music to give a very specific message. So I recall that in around, I would say in 2000 or so, I was invited to be part of an album which was called Man Ke Manjeeri. And though it's been 2 decades and more since that album was created, the wonderful thing about both that project and about the organization that really thought of commissioning that project is the fact that Breakthrough was set up as an organization which would use popular art to create social messaging. And they came up, their debut project was Man Ke Manjire, which was about taking up issues related to women and creating popular music, which would play, with accompanying music videos that would play on, let's say, Channel V or MTV or any of the mainstream popular music channels. But they would take up issues that were integral to creating a better environment, a better climate for women. Let's say they would take up the issue of domestic violence or of equal opportunity, all of which remain extremely important issues to date. And yet, it was wonderful that Breakthrough thought of using popular music, which largely sang. I mean, in India, popular music has really been about romance, and that too, sort of light-hearted cafeteria romance kind of themes. So here was an album that invited many women's voices, not only from the mainstream Hindi film industry, but which looked at classical musicians, some mainstream singers, some singers Gujarat, um, and it brought together these women's voices and created, along with men who were artists. So, for example, Shantanu Moitra, who composed and created the music for this project,
Karim.
we really created an album of songs, and also Breakthrough created a curriculum which could be taken to various spaces, schools, colleges, institutions, to discuss issues of domestic violence, etc. So I was very fortunate to be a part of this and to have experienced firsthand, not only to be invited merely as a singer, as a performer, but I was also part of the brainstorming, the many discussions and arguments and heated arguments that took place when we were deciding what the repertoire would actually represent.
Fantastic. And it's not new in India, right? So the image of the singer songwriter manifested itself in, through centuries. So in the 16th, 17th century, through the Bhakti movement, really raised a lot of issues around the caste system, complicated ritualism, and also urged people to move towards a more fulfilling method, of worship, the role of, Sufi singing, if you were to call it. TM, let me sort of bring you into the conversation. How do you believe that music can actually bring together fractured souls and heal us as a society?
First of all, thank you for having me over. It's a pleasure to meet Shubhaji again, though it's virtual. Lovely to see you. Um, well, I don't want to be a damn squib, but let's not overdo this thing that music brings everybody and we all hug in case. So I just want to just put a reality check over here. Music is part of society, and therefore everything that you see in society, beautiful and ugly, exists in the world of music. Because we are, after all, human beings who are making, listening, and organizing art and music. Therefore, music can bind, it can transcend, but it cannot if there is no concerted effort to do so. Which is why Shubhaji's example was important, because there was a concerted effort to begin a dialogue, create a conversation, and see how it goes about in society. So therefore, I think an important way by which we can actually enable this is for musicians and artists to first try and get away from their little cocoons, because in a way music is a kind of a solo act. I want to use that carefully, in the sense it is a part of a certain specific culture with a certain set of people. Your riyaz is kind of personal or taken to be personal. So there is a little world that you build around what you practice as music. Therefore, I think the first step is to take in the larger world. Can we literally take in the larger world and accept our vulnerabilities as musicians and as human beings? And I think that is the first step in actually transcending. So my personal experience, I have had a real honor to collaborate with some wonderful musicians who are in different cultural spheres. Whether it is the Jogopas from Karnataka and Maharashtra, who are transgender musicians, bhakti musicians, with whom I have shared the stage, or whether it is the Kuthu artist from Tamil Nadu, or if it is Perumal Murugan, all these people have actually helped me reflect on myself and my art. Ask difficult questions of what I do, what I sing, what I say. Why do I say something? How do I not even notice something that I sing? All this has come from, shall we say, at times allowing myself to be vulnerable to my own blind spots and noticing them and keeping them, keeping myself attentive and paying attention to it. So I think if we can create an environment where musicians of all genres, of all different parts of societies can have these open dialogues. They don't have to result in performances. Performance is just one element of art. There is a lot that happens behind the stage, where it could be exchanges, it could be conversations, it could be, we don't even spend enough time listening to each other. Simple act of listening to each other. How, we musicians don't listen. That sounds really an irony, but that's the truth. So can musicians start listening is the first question I'll ask. I'm asking that as much of myself as I'm asking of everybody else.
Great question. Shivaji, do you want to comment on it?
Yes, I agree, that let me give you the example of the Hijra community. Now, the Hijra community in India has always been one that is associated with music of a certain kind, all right? No, at least in North India, we never had a wedding or the birth of a baby or any auspicious occasion when the Hijras don't come and sing and dance and also earn a living through that. Have we ever treated them like musicians? Have we ever invited them to a festival of Indian music? And if we do, remember it is not only enough to invite artists from the community for a mainstream music festival, but we also need to give them the same respect that we would give to any other artist from a different genre. Unfortunately, as TM said, uh, there are too many hierarchies even in the arts. We still talk of higher art and lower art, and we still make these caste systems and categories. Within even classical music, do we give the same stature and status to accompanying musicians that we do to, let's say, soloists? We don't have a solo tradition in that sense. We are always performing in an ensemble. But do we give the same stature? Even today, we are at a situation where in large festivals, you will have the picture, the largest picture will be that of the politician whose government is supporting the festival. Then will come the main artist. The accompanying artists are not even mentioned. Very often, I've been in the embarrassing position of doing a concert completely pro bono for a charity, for a fundraiser, where everybody has pitched in. I couldn't sing all alone. Nobody would listen to me with just maybe a tanpura. I have tabla players, or if I'm singing popular music, I have a larger ensemble of drummers, guitar players. Do we thank all of them, and do we say, everybody thanks me for having contributed? Nobody bothers to think of contributing, of thanking the accompanying artists. Do we think of the instrument makers who are actually creating the instruments for us, which actually permit us to perform for everyone? The instrument maker in India is unfortunately a very under recognized community, and TM has written so much about it also. So I think, certainly the strength of the arts, the strength, inherent strength of music to be able to communicate with other people and to start perhaps the seeds of change cannot be doubted. But take Sufi music, for example. Today, everybody is delighted listening to Sufi music. What was the Sufi philosophy? The Sufi philosophy was a very liberal one. What are liberals called today? We know what they are called today. We know how they are scoffed and trolled today. So, on the one hand, everybody is listening to Sufi music, but the Sufi philosophy of tolerance, of inclusion, are we seeing that anywhere? Are we seeing any increase in that? So I think, yes, it's very necessary to acknowledge the inherent strength of music, but be realistic and say that does every song that I want to sing or that I've recorded, for whether it's for domestic violence or whether it is for equality among all communities or whether it is for brotherhood and peace, are we seeing, witnessing peace and brotherhood? And if we aren't, then we better get back into society and do everything possible, including making music, to ensure that there is change.
One of the
One of
points
the
that
points that
TM
Tia
mentioned was
mentioned was
that
that
uh, you know the first thing that musicians can start doing is to listen to each other, and we do know that music, uh, I still am fairly optimistic around it. So I still feel that the way music can communicate complex messages, the way that music can really share hard-hitting stories gently to soothe souls. I mean, I still believe in it. So, other than listening, as musicians and as people who have really stood for so many issues, both of you, and have done that and have continued to do that for decades. In your experience, if you could just highlight two or three or four things that we can start doing, uh, both as society for musicians and as musicians for society, to all our young audience today, what would it be? And I would, any order, maybe TM, you can start, and then Shubha.
I want to first say that the first thing we can do is to understand how art and culture and music is essential
Yeah.
to society. This is a fundamental thing that we lack in at least India for sure. We think art and music is a decoration. It's an embellishment on the necessities of life. I think that has to change. And during I think it's relevant now to speak about this, especially after the COVID pandemic. And the hundreds and the thousands of artists who were literally left in lurch, nothing, no support. We forget that most artists are living in poverty. They do depend on that one performance for their meal, for everything. And we have no system in this country, an economic or a political or social security system that ensures that these artists survive. There's no point in us describing ourselves as a diverse country of soft power and etc., 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 if we don't respect the essentiality of music and art. I think that's the first step. Can every one of us also say that Along with kapada, makan, and sadak and everything else that we need, we also need the lullaby and the music and the dance and the joy and the bowls and the lavanis and the khyals and the drupads and the Carnatics. We need every one of them. Because if you don't have those expressions of realities and beyond realities, a human being dies, civilizations collapse. There's nothing left. You know, if it's all about economy, then the question is, why do the poor make music? Why do the poor
Such a
paint?
great point.
It is, life is, you know, that's important for us to realize. The greatest art is from people who are economically poor but culturally so rich. So can we change that attitude first? Can we make it essential, you know, that this is part of our everyday living? It's part of who our society is if we want to be alive. I think that itself then changes the course of our discussions, the point of respect, point of recognition, so many things. I mean, there are far more complexities, I know, but at least I think that is probably the first step. The shirt I'm wearing is culture and art. The sari that you're wearing is culture and art. It's as essential as that. I think the senses are the most beautiful things that the human species have been gifted. And if you don't think that is essential, I don't know what then is essential. We can't feel then. We don't want to feel, is what we are saying.
Excellent point. In fact, Shivaji, if you recall a couple of weeks back when you and I were chatting, this is a point that you had brought out as well, that, you know, many fractures that have cracks that were already there in the system. You know, the last year's pandemic has only sort of helped widen that and, you know, basically stare back at our face. And any suggestions as musicians and as gurus to so many, what kind of initiatives can one take as a society? And maybe through this medium, we have so many people in today, and we will be reaching out through virtual medium to so many. What can we do collectively as society to make sure that our musicians feel part? And I completely agree with TM. If we don't sort of make it mainstream, it's not an afterthought. It's not a nice to have. We'll basically lose the fabric of our very being, of our soul.
I think one important thing we should also consider is whether this use of the term entertainment industry is at all valid when used with the arts. Because remember, all art cannot be entertaining and should not be entertaining. It should be provoking, it should move you, it should make you angry even. But it can't always be entertaining. In fact, that is the nature of art, that it speaks truth to power very often, and that may not be appreciated. Or for example, take any example. There is this photograph of Raghu Rai, great iconic photographer, from the Bhopal gas tragedy, where a child, the head of a child wasn't even buried properly, is staring back at you. Is that entertaining? It's great art, but is it entertaining? I think it is perhaps incorrect, even though the traditional understanding of what is manoranjan is perhaps different from what we consider today as being entertaining. But I still feel this idea of a foot tapping culture alone becoming this subscription to only a mono music, if you would like to call it, and anything else that disturbs that being rejected. I mean, I don't need to remind anybody that art has often and continues to transcend many, many barriers. And yet we say that, traditional music is acceptable only when it is performed with, let's say, keyboards and guitars, and with a band performing, with what we consider a modern band. So if a traditional Rajasthani song is performed with that, I don't have an issue with that, by the way. I have no problem with that. But we will accept it if it is performed in a particular way. If you get the community representative from the community who chooses to perform it only with dholak, kamaicha, etc., then it's archaic. What message are we giving of contemporaneity, of what we consider modern, what we consider relevant? So I think we have to perhaps get rid of this idea of what is entertaining and rejecting everything else that we consider doesn't fit into that compartment of entertainment that we consider consumable. And so I think perhaps that idea of retaining the diversity of the arts, even though we don't want a stadium full of people listening to Rag Darbari, no, doesn't matter. You listen to it in your small chambers, not a problem. But let's not reject it completely. And let's also subscribe to our personal preferences. I'm not saying that everybody must now spend 3 hours every day listening to this, that, and the other. But yes, you need to listen, and you also need to decide how you can support the arts, even with 1 rupee a month. If you put aside 1 rupee a month, imagine the population of India putting aside 1 rupee a month, those of us who can. Even that is going to be a huge support for the arts. Currently, our situation is that when we give our music and our arts free of any charge on social media, we have many takers. But when we start exercising our right to perhaps charge 100 rupees, we don't find so much success. So I think we need to, each one of us, in whatever capacity, as musician, as listener, as teacher, as student, as general members of the public, any art form that we support, what are we doing to actually support it, both in terms of reassurance, emotional connect, and also offering financial support?
Great point. In fact, when I was in college and I was in school, one of the things that I'll be eternally grateful for are these many platforms like Spic Mackey, and in Delhi University where I studied, there was a lot of an opportunity to understand choral form of music, where the choral tradition, where people come together and sing, even in sort of Indian classical genres, etc., and folk, and try and understand that. TM, in your opinion, do you feel that perhaps having more and more such platforms for youths, where they even get exposure to, say, a baul music, or Bardiyar songs, or music that people perhaps don't have any opportunities to hear? What would be your thoughts and some suggestions on what we could do collectively?
Well, I think that there are. I'll try and keep the answer short. I think there are three elements that need to be subverted for access. If you're talking about what you're actually asking is about the question of access, and by the access does not mean everybody has to love all the art forms. I think we make this mistake of thinking that everybody should love what. No, even the right to say I dislike happens only when there's a contact. In fact, I always say that the contact is more there for the person to say, I don't want to listen to it. But if you don't create an environment for even that crossover of this conversation, this question of choice is actually inane. Therefore, I will look at three things. There is content, there is space, and there is people. Now, how can we cross over people? That is communities, that is get different kinds of people to expose themselves to different kinds of cultures. How do you subvert the idea of space? Because the idea of space is extremely hierarchical, as much as people are. What is performed where and who performs where is entirely determined by social order. So can we subvert that? Can we change those notions of what is the ideal space? And that in a way can also bring in different kinds of people in contact with different kinds of cultures. The third is content. Shubhaji used that word modernity. We think modern is something. If you have a drum kit and if you have two guitars and if you have somebody humming a little alap followed by something in English, it's suddenly modern. I don't know how more ridiculous we can get with the idea of modern. The idea of modern is to live in today, to respond to today, and have the ability to move from where you are is modernity. Modernity is eternal. Modernity depends. If you were living in 2000 BC, you could be modern in 2000 BC based on your attitude. Therefore, let's not time constrict modernity. And we're discussing modernity when you ask this question. Being modern is allowing for multiple experiences, which means we ask questions of that which limits multiple experiences. And therefore, can content change? Can I sing in my genre? How can I respond to the larger environment? It doesn't mean throwing away the past. It means allowing the past and the present and the future to become a little more fluid so that interesting conversations can actually develop from that fluidity.
Brilliant point, TM. In fact, it kind of brings back the earlier point that you were making, about the ability to listen, the ability to be open, and even say, whether you, even if you say you disagree, have that space and that opportunity to have those conversations. I now actually want to bring in some questions from the audience. We have lots, which I have here. So if it's okay with you, maybe then we can have some of those comments and questions that will enrich this already. This is a question for Shubhaji from Delina D'Souza. Several artists reach a phase in their life when they find difficult to find inspiration. What would you suggest they do in that such a situation?
Well, I think all they need to do, and which is so easily done today, is to sit down and start looking for pieces of music on the net, depending on their personal preferences. And there you'll find a piece of music which suddenly, or you will see a film. I mean, inspiration comes from life and from even the most, sometimes the artistic impulse is also tickled and provoked by some of the most dreadful things that happen all around you. So I think all you need to do is to become an observer of life, and the inspiration will come avalanching into your life. And you'll have to say, oh my, I didn't ask for so much inspiration. But truly, whether it's from music and art, or whether from just, I mean, all this year we've all been behind windows looking out and living our lives. And yet, there is so much to be inspired by. There are so many stories to be inspired by. So I think even having reached an age where normally one feels one has seen a lot and experienced a lot, I really feel that it's wonderful that you continue to be delighted by the smallest things and by the most, sometimes even moved by the most dreadful things, all of which also happen in abundance all around us. So I think you just have to be an observer of life.
And keep your mind open, right? And be receptive to whatever is happening to around you. So the next question is to TM from a very young student, BCom student called Siraj. Does music have the capacity to change a person's mentality or perception?
Yeah, first, human beings have the capacity to change the mentality of people. And music is a fabulous vehicle to do that. There are multiple ways you can do it, even in music. If you look at different genres, I like to use the word intentionality. And I think every genre has a certain intentionality. And if you look at, for example, rap music, or most music that has come from, shall we say, marginalized people, then the political ideas are on your face. Their realities are very, very, very sharp, and that's to shake you, and that's the reality that they live with. So the politics and the transformation they are hoping is through that direct, shall we say, presentation of the worst and the most beautiful things in their life. So that is one way of, and there is a difference between saying it and singing it, and that's the magic of music. I can say the same thing in an essay and you can read it, but when it comes through music, something else happens. The music is not something you can hold in your hand. That's the magic of it. You can't keep seeing it. It's gone, and it comes and it's poof, it's gone. And then it's an internal memory. It's a sonic memory. It's that word, but that word in a tune. So what's the difference between a word said and a word hummed? I think that's a question we can all ask ourselves. We know there's a difference. And I think that's where music can play that, shall we say, that enabling role, irrespective of the intention of the word. In some art forms, the politics may not be completely in the word. It could be just by moving you away from some comfort through the tune, through the raga, through the rhythm, through a cross beat that shakes you from what you're comfortable with. So from the most abstract to the most literal, when all that comes in the form of, shall we call it, sonic waves, then something quite incredible can happen, transformation can happen. But also, please remember, for it to really happen, we have to go back to what you and Shubhaji said, is that the individuals engaged in it should be receptive and open to receiving it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen by itself.
TM, I just want to bring to your point, which you talked about, saying that you could read something in an essay or you can listen to something. I was just reading, in preparation for this session, I went deep into this study that was done by MIT in 2016. I still haven't finished reading the whole paper, but they have started to identify there is a part in the brain which is purely dedicated, those set of neurons are purely dedicated to uh, sort of understanding music as opposed to any other form of stimuli. So I have to go back and read, and I'm going to send you that paper as well. It's really mind-boggling. So let's go on to a couple more questions. This is from Chris Ethan Pinto. Do you see the environment and the music that inspired you to become such accomplished individuals evolve for the better or the worse?
That's a tough one because I'm an eternal optimist. So let me say that I do hope that it will change for the better. At the same time, change can happen only not through a single individual, but a collective really makes a very big difference. And I think finally, in any field, with any issue that we take up, I think it can only happen when slowly, gradually, and sometimes we're in a hurry to achieve that. But it can only happen when everybody decides that this issue is of burning importance and we must do something to bring about a change. I don't know if that makes sense, but
absolutely. I think it's a fantastic question, really. In terms of, and I would actually just want to comment further, if you would allow, is to Chris back on this question he's asked. Is that I think it also depends on us, right? Like TM rightly said. I mean, the more receptive we are, and the more open we are, and the more we listen. I think the beauty about music is that it will evolve. I mean, that's how it's evolved, and that's how music has stayed with us for so long. So I think it also depends not just on accomplished musicians, but also on us, on listeners, as collectively as society to continue to evolve it.
And may I add one small thing? Very often, because change is such a huge word, and because I wouldn't want to make tall claims, but and I understand that change cannot happen miraculously, particularly through the arts. But I also feel that for that reason, I cannot be lethargic and say, "Arey, change to kuch nahi hoga. What's the point in doing anything?" So I think that responsibility of deciding what are the concerns that I must address. And if I'm truly committed to them, I will address them naturally through the medium and through my form of expression. And I need to do that small bit, irrespective of whether that album sells 1 million copies and becomes what were once called platinum, tracks, or whether you win a Grammy for it or not, or whether you need to do your bit in your own field and not bother, waiting for that golden moment when you'll have everybody in the country listening to a song that you sing. There's no point waiting for that. We all, as artists, so much of my repertoire remains unsung, unheard on stage, but I still engage with it because that is what concerns me.
No, this is fantastic, and I hope we continue to listen to you, Shubhaji. Please don't ever think that so much is not heard. So now I'm going to encourage you to sort of make sure that you put it out there so that people like us can actually get to hear such gems.
I just want to add one thing.
Yes.
Let's not think change is instant coffee. It's not going to happen like you put out a song and the world is going to change tomorrow. Even the ones that seem to change us for 1 month. The second month we go back to being who we are. So let's remember that change is a constant engagement, and sometimes it happens after generations. Just look at history. It happens after generations, and therefore for us to say that no, nothing's going to happen is actually a way of saying you don't want to be active. That's what it is. So I mean, I think it's happened more now because everything is instantaneous today. We see something that has 1 million views, in 2 days, and think that's going to change society. And then that passes to that also passes. It's a collective of many events or many engagements that cumulatively and compounds themselves to something quite beautiful. And it's okay if you and I are not there to see that happen.
Fantastic. Um, I'm going to ask a slightly tougher question. At least I found it very tough to even frame the question when I was trying to put this together. Whether we like it or not, worldwide, globally, we're becoming increasingly polarized, and there seems to be inability to be able to listen or to respect someone else's views, either like my way or the highway. What can we learn from our own music traditions, and what can we learn as artists or as people who understand and appreciate music to try and make sense and reduce that polarization to some extent? To anyone, I mean, either of you, Shubhaji maybe.
Shivaji, you go first. I'll let you give the solution.
No solution in sight at all.
Shivaji, you are the optimist. Come on.
Yes, well, as I said, remember that your engagement, an artist's engagement with any issue must come from personal conviction first. So, as a professional artist, it's also possible that I may be asked to sing a particular song, which is to be a campaign song for a particular issue. If I do not connect with it, and let me take the example of women's rights once again. So, we've all done this song, that album, which was very successful, it ran on mainstream television, etc., etc. But remember that when you commission a campaign like this, and particularly in the corporate world, you may have decided that this is one item on the CSR agenda which matches what I can engage, put my money to support. But actually, 10 years later, you may realize that those very people who participated in that project may show, evident and amply evident signs of misogyny and patriarchy and inhumane behavior towards women. It is possible, and we are seeing that. Sometimes I'm shocked that people I work with are reporting completely different points of view. And of course, they have a right to change their opinion. Of course, they have a right to express their opinions. But where will you sing? What song of peace and harmony and shanti are you going to commission when actually speaking? You need to see these can't be in the commissioning of these projects, in the creating of these campaigns, in the money that you spend on getting millions of views for them. Perhaps we're actually not focusing on the issue, as we are spending far too much time, money, and effort on creating a campaign and ensuring that it meets with the measures of success that are considered so important today. Otherwise, in today's world, if I have an issue with, and I want to talk about that issue through my music, I can share the music with my listeners. It may be, of course, my YouTube channel has some 600 people following it, so that's not going to reach too far. But the same song, if it is part of a campaign, will suddenly have millions of viewers. How does that happen? We have celebrities who are actually hired to create messaging, to create an impact. Aren't we talking influencers these days? Aren't we talking about people who are micro influencers even? What are we saying? I think there has to be a sense of who is aligning with that particular cause, and also retaining a conviction with that cause. You can't become, you can't say, let me sing of peace and harmony today, but then say, nothing is wrong with the world. There is no polarization. Everything is fine. This is some, some conspiracy somewhere to bring down the image of India. What is it? Are we going to become blind and deaf then? So I think, are we going to close our eyes to all these issues? So I think it's very necessary to, have a connect with reality and acknowledge that a song can have a magical effect, but it's not going to bring about change immediately. And also, I think for an artist, this is what I've come to experience. I feel that when I am concerned about an issue and when I want to use music for a particular reason, I should do so independently. My alignments with various professional creators of such campaigns hasn't been so exciting.
Oh, wow. I mean, I would want to sort of go on and on. But I think we'll have to sort of wrap it up today. But I really hope that we can, all our audience and especially the two of you who have been sort of at the forefront of not just of your respective musical genres, but also in terms of what you stand for, in terms of the music that you've created, what the message that you've, the kind of communities that you've brought together. I hope that you'll continue to do that. And we have a fairly large group of very young people today. So maybe we all can start with ourselves, as TM had said, and maybe just take a moment to listen to different genres of music. One, two, stay open, listen to each other, have the opportunity to be open to listen to different types of things, and make sure that your music heals you. The world around you will be healed by itself. So thank you so much, TM and Shubhaji. We hope that we will have the opportunity to interact with you again. And on behalf of everyone at Knowledge Factory, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, T.M. Krishna ji and Shubhadi, and of course Meena, for that fabulous, passionate and animated discussion. And I know that I speak for thousands of fans who are tuned in today and are listening very carefully to all of you. And especially, this session has been a dream session for Meena, our moderator. She's a student and a performer of several genres of music herself. I wish we could have had a longer session to discuss many of the points that you have brought up in this time frame. And there is so much really to learn from all of you. So thank you so much, but please continue to share the magic that only you can create.